The moment I hit send, exhaustion made me careless. 12 hours in the emergency room does that. Strips away your attention to detail until you're operating on muscle memory and caffeine fumes. I'd meant to text my friend Sarah about my ex, Marcus, the one who'd ghosted me 3 weeks ago after 8 months together. The text was simple, pathetic really. I wish I was in his bed. But my thumb had slipped while scrolling through contacts, and instead of Sarah's name, I'd tapped on something else entirely. KM, emergency only. My stomach dropped. That contact had been sitting in my phone for 6 months, untouched since the night I'd saved it. Or thought I'd saved someone. A gas station parking lot in the worst part of Charlotte. 2 in the morning, me coming off a double shift when I'd seen a man bleeding out near the air pump. He'd been young, mid-20s maybe, clutching his side while another man, older, unnervingly calm, had knelt beside him speaking rapid Korean. The older man had looked up at me with dark eyes that seemed to calculate my worth in half a second. "You're a nurse," he'd said. Not a question. I'd nodded, already moving toward them, my training overriding my common sense. Help him. So I did. Pressure on the wound, elevated position, checking his airway while the older man made phone calls in a language I didn't understand. An ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. Before they loaded the younger man into the back, the older one had pressed a business card into my palm. No name, just a phone number and 2 letters, KM. Emergency only, he'd said. I'd saved it in my phone and never thought about it again. Until tonight, when my exhausted brain had sent the most embarrassing text of my life to a number that clearly belonged to someone I should never, ever contact unless the world was ending. 3 minutes passed. My apartment felt smaller with each second. The walls of my tiny studio closing in as I stared at my phone screen. Maybe he wouldn't respond. Maybe he deleted the contact after that night, or changed his number, or my phone buzzed. 1 word, address. My hands started shaking. I typed back immediately, fingers fumbling over the keys. "I'm so sorry. Wrong number. That message wasn't meant for you. Please delete it." The response came within seconds. "Your address." Now, something cold slid down my spine. This wasn't how normal people responded to a misdirected text. This was something else entirely, something that made my nurse's instinct for danger start screaming. I could lie, give him a fake address, but what if he already knew where I lived? What if that card had been more than just a phone number? Why? I typed. Another buzz. "You compromised a secure line. Address. 5 minutes. Compromised?" My brain struggled to process what that meant while my survival instinct kicked into overdrive. Should I call the police? And tell them what? That I'd texted someone by accident and now they wanted my address. That sounded insane, even in my own head. But something about the clinical efficiency of his messages, the complete lack of confusion or awkwardness, told me this was serious. Whoever KM was, I'd just made a mistake that went way beyond social embarrassment. I typed out my address with trembling fingers. Apartment 2C. If you're enjoying this story so far, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button. Things are about to get a lot more complicated, and you won't want to miss what happens next. 15 minutes went by. I spent them pacing my apartment, looking out the window every 30 seconds, my heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me still hoped this was some kind of overreaction, that maybe he just wanted to lecture me about phone security, or... That's when I heard them. Motorcycles. Multiple motorcycles, their engines growling like mechanical wolves as they rolled to a stop outside my building. I lived in a decent neighborhood in Charlotte, the kind of place where the biggest excitement was usually someone's car alarm going off at 3 a.m. The sound of 5 bikes parking in formation on my quiet street was wrong in every possible way. I moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain. Under the streetlight, I could see them clearly. 5 men, all wearing dark clothing, all moving with a kind of coordinated precision that spoke of practice. They weren't a casual riding club out for a night cruise. This was something else. The one in front removed his helmet. Even from the second floor, even in the dim orange glow of the streetlight, I recognized him. The man from the gas station, the one who'd knelt beside the bleeding stranger with that unsettling calm. He looked up at my building like he could see exactly which window I was hiding behind, then said something to the others. 2 of them moved to cover the front entrance. 2 more disappeared around the side of the building. He walked toward my door alone. My phone buzzed 1 more time. Open the door when I knock. Don't make me ask twice. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, to climb out the fire escape, to do anything except open that door. but I was 2 stories up with no real escape route, and something told me that running would only make this worse. Whatever I'd stumbled into by sending that text, whatever compromised secure line meant, I was already in it. The only question now was whether opening the door would help me survive it. 3 sharp knocks echoed through my apartment. I took a breath, whispered a prayer to whoever might be listening, and opened the door. He stood in my doorway like he owned it. Owned the building, owned the street, owned every breath of air in a 5-mile radius. The man from the gas station looked different up close, more dangerous somehow, though he hadn't moved a muscle toward me. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, and a jaw that suggested he didn't smile often. His eyes were what got me, though. Black as midnight and twice as empty. Inside, not a request. I stepped back. What else could I do? He moved into my apartment with the confidence of someone who'd entered 1,000 rooms that didn't belong to him, his gaze sweeping across my tiny studio in about 3 seconds flat, taking inventory, cataloging exits, the way soldiers do, or criminals. "You're the nurse," he said. Still not a question. "Yes." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "From the gas station. I helped that man, the one who was bleeding. I know who you are." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen twice, then turned it toward me. My text message glowed on the display, those 5 stupid words mocking me from his inbox. "Explain this." Heat flooded my face. It was an accident. I meant to text my friend about my ex-boyfriend, and I hit the wrong contact. "I'm sorry. I know it was inappropriate, but it was just a mistake." A mistake. He said the word like he was testing it, seeing if it fit the situation. Apparently it didn't, because his expression didn't change. "Do you understand what you've done? Sent an embarrassing text to the wrong number? Compromised a private line." He pocketed his phone and moved deeper into my apartment, checking the window, the fire escape beyond it. "That number isn't listed anywhere. It doesn't appear on any network, any database, any record that exists. The only people who have it are people I've given it to directly, for very specific reasons." My mouth went dry. I didn't tell anyone about it. I swear, I just saved it in my phone after that night and never. "That's not the problem." He turned back to me, and for the first time I saw something flicker in those empty eyes. Not anger exactly, but calculation. "The problem is that text message pinged off cell towers all over Charlotte before it reached me. The problem is that I have rivals who monitor communications traffic looking for patterns, for weaknesses, for anything they can exploit. The problem is that as of 20 minutes ago, at least 3 different organizations know that someone sent an intimate message to my private line." The room tilted slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means they think you're already mine." He said it flatly, like he was discussing the weather. "A girlfriend, a lover, someone under my protection, which makes you leverage. But I'm not. We don't even know each other. Doesn't matter what's true." He checked his watch, a gesture so casual it seemed obscene given what he was saying. "Matters what they think. And right now, they think you're close enough to me to have my private number and comfortable enough to send me messages about wanting to be in my bed." Oh God. The full weight of my mistake crashed down on me like a collapsing building. So what happens now? Now I make a choice. He moved to my couch, sat down without invitation, and gestured for me to do the same. "I can cut you loose. Tell my world you were nobody, wrong number, meaningless. But that paints a target on your back that I can't erase. If they think I'm lying to protect you, they'll assume you matter even more. If they believe me, they'll still come after you just to test whether I was telling the truth." My legs felt weak. I sat in the chair across from him, my nurse's training the only thing keeping me from hyperventilating. Or I claim you." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. "Tell everyone exactly what you are to me, give you a role in my world that makes sense, that explains why you have my number, and why touching you would be the last mistake anyone ever makes." "What kind of role?" He leaned back, studying me with those calculating eyes. "The nurse who saved my life. My private medic, off the books, untouchable. Someone I owe a debt to, someone under my absolute protection." Something in his phrasing snagged my attention. "But I didn't save your life. I helped that other man, the younger one. They don't know that." His voice didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. A door closing. "They just need to believe you're valuable enough to me that hurting you would be declaring war." I should have said no. Should have told him to leave, should have called the police. Should have done anything except sit there trying to process the fact that my entire life had just derailed because of 5 words sent to the wrong number. But the way he was looking at me, the complete absence of doubt in his expression, told me this wasn't a negotiation. This was him informing me of the decision he'd already made. How long? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Until the current territorial disputes settle. 3 months, maybe 4. He stood, pulling out his phone again. My people will be outside your building 24/7. You go to work, you come home, you live your life. But you don't talk to anyone about this arrangement. You don't try to leave the city. And if anyone approaches you asking questions, you call me immediately. And if I refuse? He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. Then I leave, and you take your chances with the people who are already trying to figure out who you are and how they can use you against me. Your choice. It wasn't a choice at all. What do I call you? I asked. Min Jae. He opened the door. Kong Min Jae. He left without another word, pulling the door shut behind him with a soft click that felt far too gentle for what had just happened. I sat frozen in my chair, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway, then the rumble of motorcycles starting up outside. But they didn't leave. The engines cut off after a moment, settling into silence that somehow felt more ominous than the noise. I moved to the window. 2 bikes remained parked directly across the street, their riders still astride them, helmets on, waiting, watching. The others had disappeared, but I had no doubt they were close. Min Jae had meant what he said about 24/7 protection. Or surveillance. Hard to tell the difference. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the gas station 6 months ago, trying to remember details I hadn't thought mattered at the time. The younger man's face, pale and sweating. His labored breathing. The way Min Jae had watched me work with an intensity that had felt like being studied under a microscope. I'd assumed he was just worried about his friend, maybe a brother or cousin given the family resemblance. But the way he'd said, the nurse who saved my life tonight, with that door closing behind his eyes, something about that didn't fit. My alarm went off at 6. I'd given up on sleep around 4, so I was already showered and dressed when the buzzer rang. My hand hesitated over the intercom button. It's Jean. A voice I didn't recognize, accent slight but present. Mr. Kong sent me to drive you to work. Of course he did. I pressed the button to unlock the front door, grabbed my bag, and headed downstairs. The man waiting in the lobby was younger than Min Jae, maybe late 20s, with a lean build and sharp eyes that tracked my movement down the stairs. He wore normal clothes, jeans, a dark jacket, but stood with the same coiled readiness I'd seen in Min Jae. You don't need to drive me, I said. The hospital is 20 minutes on the bus. Not anymore. He held the door open. Black sedan, corner spot. The car was expensive, the kind with leather seats that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Jean drove in silence, taking a route I didn't recognize, and it took me a full 10 minutes to realize he was checking for anyone following us. Looping blocks, taking sudden turns, watching his mirrors more than the road ahead. Has this happened before? I asked. Someone accidentally contacting him? Jin's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. No. So I'm the first person stupid enough to text the wrong number? You're the first person who had the number to begin with. He turned onto the main road leading to Charlotte Memorial. Mr. Kong doesn't give out that line. Ever. Which brought me back to the question that had been gnawing at me all night. Why did he give it to me? Jean pulled up to the hospital entrance, but didn't answer. Just waited for me to get out, then said, I'll be here when your shift ends. Don't leave through any other exit. My shift was chaos from the moment I clocked in. Multi-car pileup on I-85, 2 cardiac arrests, and a construction accident that brought in 4 workers with varying degrees of trauma. I barely had time to think about Min Jae or private numbers, or the fact that my life had apparently become a crime thriller overnight. But during my lunch break, sitting in the staff room with cold coffee and a sandwich I couldn't taste, I pulled out my phone and did what I should have done last night. I Googled Kong Min Jae. Nothing. Not a single result that matched. I tried variations, Min Jae Kong, MJ Kong, adding Charlotte and business, and every other keyword I could think of. Still nothing. The man existed in a complete digital void, which was almost impressive in 2024. You okay? My coworker Jennifer slid into the chair across from me. You've been staring at your phone for 5 minutes. I locked the screen. Just tired. Long night. Tell me about it. Did you see the guy they brought in from that warehouse fire? The one with the tattoos. She lowered her voice. Rivera said he's with one of those organized crime families. Korean mob or something. Had to put him in the secure wing. Every muscle in my body tensed. Korean mob? Yeah, apparently Charlotte's got a whole underground thing happening. Russians, Koreans, some Eastern European groups. I had no idea until Rivera mentioned it. Jennifer checked her watch and stood. Anyway, break's over. You coming? I nodded, but my mind was racing. Korean organized crime. A man who didn't exist online. A private number that nobody should have. The pieces were assembling themselves into a picture I really didn't want to see. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. Gene was waiting exactly where he'd said he'd be, and the drive home followed the same careful route as this morning. 2 of the motorcycles were still parked across from my building when we arrived. Mr. Kong will call you tonight, Gene said as I got out. Answer. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, unlocked the door, and stopped dead. Someone had been inside. Nothing was out of place, nothing obviously disturbed, but I'd been a nurse long enough to trust my instincts. The air felt different, like someone's presence still lingered in the space between my furniture. My laptop sat on the kitchen counter exactly where I'd left it, but the charging cable was plugged into a different outlet. Small things. Deliberate things. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I knew who it was before I answered. You noticed. Min-jae's voice was steady, unsurprised. Good. That means you're paying attention. You had someone search my apartment. I had someone secure it. There's a difference. I heard background noise on his end, voices speaking Korean. We found 2 listening devices. One in your bedroom, one in the living room. They've been there approximately 72 hours. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Someone bugged my apartment 3 days ago? Before you sent that text. His voice remained maddeningly calm, like he was discussing dinner plans instead of surveillance equipment planted in my home. Which means they were already watching you, already trying to figure out who you were and why I might care. I sank onto my couch, the same spot where Min-jae had sat last night delivering impossible choices. But how did they even know about me? I haven't seen you since the gas station, haven't contacted you, haven't. Someone saw us that night. Background noise faded as he moved somewhere quieter. Someone who recognized me, who noted that I stopped to help an injured man and that a woman in scrubs provided medical care. They've been trying to identify you ever since. My hands had started shaking again. So when I sent that text, you confirmed their suspicions. A pause, then something that might have been frustration crept into his tone. They've been monitoring your building, your routine, waiting to see if I'd make contact. Your message gave them everything they needed to assume you were important to me. But I'm not. The words came out sharper than intended. I'm nobody. Just a nurse who happened to be in the wrong parking lot at the wrong time. Silence stretched between us, heavy with things he wasn't saying. Finally, get some rest. Tomorrow we need to make this official. What does that mean? It means people need to see us together. Need to understand that you're under my protection and what that protection costs anyone who ignores it. He hung up before I could respond. I didn't sleep that night either. Every creak of the building, every car passing on the street below, every distant siren made me jump. The idea that strangers had been in my apartment, planting devices, listening to my conversations, it made my skin crawl. What had they heard? My phone calls with Sarah complaining about Marcus? Me talking to myself while cooking dinner? The embarrassing habit I had of narrating my decisions out loud when I was trying to organize my thoughts? Morning came too fast. Gene arrived at 6 again, but this time he had instructions. Mr. Kong wants you to call in sick today. Tell them you have food poisoning, something that'll keep you out for at least 48 hours. I can't just not show up. You can and you will. Jin's expression was sympathetic but firm. What happens today needs to happen without your hospital schedule interfering. I made the call from the car, hating how easily the lie came. My supervisor wasn't happy. We were already short-staffed, but food poisoning was food poisoning. She told me to rest and check in tomorrow. Jean drove us out of my neighborhood, away from the hospital, toward a part of Charlotte I rarely visited. Upscale restaurants and boutiques gave way to industrial warehouses and shipping facilities. He pulled into a parking garage beneath a building that looked abandoned from the outside, all broken windows and graffiti-tagged walls. Inside was a different story. The elevator was new, the hallway on the 3rd floor looked freshly renovated, and the door Jean led me to opened into what could only be described as a penthouse disguised as a warehouse loft. Exposed brick, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows that had been carefully treated to look broken from outside while providing a crystal-clear view of the city from within. Min-jae stood by those windows, phone to his ear, speaking Korean in low, clipped tones. He wore a different look today. Expensive casual, dark jeans, and a fitted black shirt that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Without the jacket from last night, I could see the way he moved, the controlled economy of motion that spoke of someone comfortable with violence. He ended his call and turned to face me. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? No. At least he was honest. Sit. We need to talk about what happens next. I chose the chair farthest from him, a small rebellion that he acknowledged with the faintest quirk of his lips. Almost a smile, but not quite. The story we're telling, he began, is that you saved my life 6 months ago, that I was the one bleeding in that parking lot, that your quick thinking kept me alive until the ambulance arrived, and that I owe you a debt I can never fully repay. But that's not what happened. It's what happened as far as anyone else is concerned. He moved away from the window, settling into the couch across from me. This afternoon, I'm taking you to a restaurant in the South District. It's neutral territory, a place where different organizations occasionally meet to discuss business. We'll have dinner, we'll be seen together, and by tonight everyone who matters will know exactly who you are and what you mean to me. My stomach nodded. And what do I mean to you, according to this story? You're the nurse who saved my life. You're under my absolute protection, and anyone who touches you will answer to me personally. His eyes held mine, dark and unreadable. You'll be safer than you've ever been in your life, because hurting you would be the same as declaring war on my entire organization. Your organization. I tested the words, seeing how they felt. What exactly do you do, Min-jae? Import-export. The answer came too smoothly, too practiced. Mostly legitimate business with a few gray areas that don't concern you. Except they do concern me now. I leaned forward. Because I'm apparently part of your world whether I want to be or not, and I'd like to know what I'm actually involved in. He studied me for a long moment, and I got the sense he was recalculating something, adjusting his assessment. I manage territorial interests for a network of Korean businessmen who operate in the southeastern United States. Sometimes those interests conflict with other networks, Russian, Italian, local organizations. When conflicts arise, I resolve them. Resolve them how? However necessary. No apology in his voice, no shame. Just fact. The restaurant was called Moonlight Garden, tucked into a street that somehow felt removed from the rest of Charlotte despite being right downtown. Red lanterns hung above the entrance, and through the windows I could see dark wood panels and private booths separated by rice paper screens. Jean dropped us at the front door, then drove away to park somewhere I couldn't see. Min-jae placed his hand on the small of my back as we entered. The touch was light, almost impersonal, but deliberate. A statement for anyone watching. Act natural, he murmured near my ear. We're two people having dinner, nothing more. Except everything about this was more. The hostess recognized him immediately, bowing slightly before leading us to a booth in the back corner. Positioned so we could see the entire restaurant, but others would have to look for us deliberately. Strategic seating. The kind that said this wasn't Min-jae's first time requiring both visibility and tactical advantage. We settled across from each other. He ordered in Korean, something I couldn't follow beyond recognizing it as food, then turned his attention fully to me. Tell me about yourself, he said. Not the rehearsed version. Real details I can use if someone asks me questions. I picked up my water glass just to have something to do with my hands. What kind of details? Where you're from? Family? Why you became a nurse? He leaned back, giving the appearance of relaxed interest. If I'm claiming you saved my life, I should know who you are. Fair point. I grew up in Asheville. My mom was a teacher. Dad worked construction until he died when I was 16. Heart attack. No siblings. The words came out mechanical, a history I'd recited enough times that it had lost its emotional weight. I became a nurse because watching my dad die in that hospital made me realize I wanted to be the person who could actually do something instead of just standing there feeling helpless. Something shifted in Min-jae's expression. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. How long have you been in Charlotte? For years. Came for the nursing program at UNC Charlotte. Stayed because I got a good position at Memorial. I traced the rim of my glass. Nothing interesting, nothing special. Just a regular life until some idiot sent a text to the wrong number. That idiot saved a man's life 6 months ago. His voice was quiet. Don't discount that. I did what any nurse would do. Most people would have kept walking. He glanced past me toward the restaurant entrance, tracking someone I couldn't see. Most people don't stop to help bleeding strangers in dangerous neighborhoods at 2 a.m. Before I could respond, a server arrived with food I hadn't ordered. Grilled meats, rice, banchan in small dishes that covered the table. Min-jae began serving me first, another deliberate gesture that spoke of care and attention. playing the role of protective benefactor for our invisible audience. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was incredible, flavors I'd never experienced, but I could barely taste it around the anxiety lodged in my throat. "They're watching us," Min-jae said conversationally, as if commenting on the weather. "3 tables to your left, 2 men in business suits. Russian outfit that's been expanding into territory they shouldn't. Don't look." I kept my eyes on my plate. "What do they want?" "To see if the rumors are true. To assess whether you're a weakness they can exploit." He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. The touch was warm, steady, completely at odds with the danger he was describing. "Keep eating. Smile at me occasionally. Act like this is normal." Normal. Right. Having dinner with a crime boss while Russian gangsters evaluated whether I was worth kidnapping. Just another Thursday night. "Tell me about Marcus," Min-jae said, and the sudden shift in topic nearly made me choke on my rice. "What? Your ex-boyfriend. The one the text was actually about." He squeezed my hand gently, a reminder that we were performing. I should know about him too. I forced myself to relax, to play along. "Marcus Rivera. We dated for 8 months, broke up 3 weeks ago. He's a physical therapist at Memorial, which makes work incredibly awkward now. He ended things over text while I was in the middle of a shift, said he needed space to figure out what he wanted." "And you still want him back?" "I thought I did." The admission surprised me. Last night, when I sent that text, I was exhausted and lonely and convinced I'd made some kind of mistake letting him go. But sitting here now, talking about him like he's some distant memory, I don't know. Maybe I just missed having someone, not necessarily him. Min-jae's thumb brushed across my knuckles, an absent gesture that felt too intimate for a performance. "Loneliness makes people do irrational things. Is that experience talking?" His eyes met mine, and for just a second I saw something raw beneath the calculated exterior. "Yes." The moment broke when a man approached our table. He was older, 50s maybe, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of expensive suit that screamed old money. His smile was pleasant, almost grandfatherly, but his eyes were calculating. "Kong Min-jae," he said in accented English. "I heard you were dining here tonight." Min-jae didn't release my hand. "Dimitri, I didn't realize you frequented Korean establishments. I appreciate good food regardless of origin." Dimitri's gaze shifted to me, assessing. "And good company. You haven't introduced me to your friend." This was it. The moment Min-jae had orchestrated. The reason we were here. I could feel the weight of attention from around the restaurant. Conversations dying as people tuned in to what would happen next. Min-jae stood slowly, drawing me up with him, positioning himself slightly in front of me, protective without being obvious. "This is Dr. Sarah Chun," he said, the lie smooth as silk. "The woman who saved my life." The name hit me like cold water. Dr. Sarah Chun. Not my real name, not even close, but Min-jae delivered it with such absolute certainty that for a moment I almost questioned my own identity. His hand tightened on mine, a warning to stay silent, to let him control this. Dimitri's eyes narrowed slightly. "A doctor. How fortunate you were in the right place at the right time." "Nurse practitioner," I corrected, finding my voice. If we were doing this, we had to make it believable. "I don't use the doctor title. Feels pretentious." Min-jae's fingers relaxed. Good answer, apparently. Even more impressive. Dimitri smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And how exactly did you save our friend's life?" This was the test. The moment where our story had to hold up under scrutiny or fall apart completely. I looked at Min-jae, letting uncertainty show on my face. The natural reaction of someone uncomfortable discussing a traumatic event. He answered for me. "Parking lot on Davidson, 6 months ago. Punctured lung, internal bleeding. Dr. Chin kept me stable until the ambulance arrived." His voice carried across the quiet restaurant, meant for more than just Dimitri. "I owe her a debt I can never repay." How romantic. Dimitri's tone suggested he found it anything but. "And now you dine together in public, making quite the statement." Not a statement. Just dinner. Min-jae's delivery was perfect. Casual enough to seem genuine, firm enough to establish boundaries. Dr. Chun has been kind enough to provide ongoing medical consultation when my regular physicians prove inadequate. Smart. It explained why I'd have his private number, why we'd maintain contact, without painting me as a romantic interest. Professional relationship, nothing more. Except the way Min-jae was still holding my hand suggested otherwise, a deliberate contradiction that would keep people guessing. "I see." Dimitri looked between us, trying to read what wasn't being said. "Well, I won't intrude on your evening any longer. Perhaps we'll see each other again soon, Dr. Chun. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. We'll be watching you. He walked away, and Min Jae guided me back to sitting, his hand remaining on mine across the table even after we were no longer standing. The restaurant slowly returned to its normal noise level, conversations resuming, but I could still feel eyes on us. Why did you change my name? I kept my voice low. Because Sarah Mitchell is too easy to find. Medical licensing boards, nursing registrations, address records. He picked up his chopsticks with his free hand, continuing to eat as if nothing had happened. Dr. Sarah Chun is generic enough to create confusion, delay anyone trying to verify details. By the time they figure out the name doesn't match any local records, the story will already be established. And when they do figure it out, then you were protecting your privacy, using a professional alias. People in my world understand the need for discretion. He served me more food, the gesture oddly domestic. Eat. We need to stay at least another 30 minutes. I forced down rice I couldn't taste, my mind racing. That man, Dmitri, he's Russian mob? Bratva, yes. Controls most of the Eastern distribution networks. Min Jae spoke matter-of-factly, like discussing weather patterns. He's been trying to expand into territory my associates control. Tonight was reconnaissance, seeing if the rumors about you were accurate. And are they? Accurate. His eyes met mine. They are now. We finished dinner in relative silence, punctuated by Min Jae's occasional comments about the food or casual questions about my work. Nothing substantive, just the kind of conversation two people having dinner might have. But his thumb kept tracing small circles on my hand. A nervous habit or calculated intimacy. I couldn't tell which. When we finally left, Jean was waiting with the car. Min Jae held the door for me, then slid in beside me instead of taking the front seat. Jean drove without needing directions, taking us back through the city toward my apartment. That went well, Min Jae said once we were moving. Define well. I turned to face him in the dim interior. Because from where I'm sitting, I just became a target for Russian gangsters who think I'm important to you. You were already a target the moment you sent that text. His voice was patient, explaining something obvious. Now you're a target with protection that makes approaching you suicide. There's a difference. What about my real name? Someone at the hospital could mention it, or my neighbors, or already handled. As of this morning, you're taking a medical leave from Charlotte Memorial, personal family emergency, indefinite timeline. Your apartment lease has been transferred to a management company that won't discuss tenant details. He checked his phone, scrolling through messages. Your mail is being forwarded to a P.O. box my people monitor. For all practical purposes, Sarah Mitchell has temporarily vanished. The systematic erasure of my identity should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with anger. You did all that without asking me. Would you have said yes? No. Then I saved us both the argument. He pocketed his phone. You can be angry about it, but you're alive to be angry. That's what matters. Jean pulled up outside my building. The motorcycles were still there, plus a new black SUV I didn't recognize parked directly in front of my entrance. More guards, more surveillance, more evidence that my life had become something unrecognizable. Min Jae walked me to my door, a courtesy that felt absurd given everything else. In the hallway outside my apartment, under the flickering fluorescent light that the landlord never fixed, he finally released my hand. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow we need to discuss long-term arrangements. What kind of arrangements? He was already walking away. The kind that keep you alive. 3 days passed in a strange limbo. I didn't go to work, didn't leave my apartment except when Jean drove me to necessary appointments, which turned out to be meetings with Min Jae in that warehouse loft, going over details of our fabricated history until I could recite them in my sleep. Where had I treated him? Davidson Street parking lot, near the old textile factory. What was the injury? Punctured left lung, broken ribs, internal bleeding from blunt force trauma. How long did I stay with him? 17 minutes until paramedics arrived. Why didn't I go to the hospital with him? He refused, said he had private doctors who would handle it. The lies became smoother each time I repeated them. That should have bothered me more than it did. On the 4th morning, I woke to find a box outside my door. No note, just expensive packaging and tissue paper wrapped around clothing I definitely hadn't ordered. Designer labels, the kind I'd only seen in magazines. Dresses, casual wear, even shoes in exactly my size. My phone rang before I could process what I was looking at. The clothes are for tonight, Min Jae said without preamble. Wear the black dress, the one with the asymmetrical hem. Jean will pick you up at 7. What's tonight? A gathering. Some of my associates want to meet the woman who saved my life. He paused, and I heard that background noise again. Voices in Korean, the clink of glasses. It's not optional. Everything with you seems non-optional. Yes. At least he was consistent. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. He hung up before I could argue. The dress fit perfectly, which bothered me more than it should have. How did he know my size? Had someone gone through my closet during one of those security sweeps? The thought of strangers cataloging my clothing made my skin crawl. But I put on the dress anyway, because what choice did I have? Jean arrived exactly at 7. The drive took us to a part of Charlotte I'd never seen. Old industrial waterfront converted into upscale venues. The kind of place where valet parking cost more than my grocery budget. He pulled up to a building with no signage, just an unmarked door where 2 men in dark suits stood guard. They recognized Jean, nodded us through without question. Inside was a private club that probably catered to people who thought country clubs were too pedestrian. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, a bar that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, mixing with the low murmur of conversation in multiple languages. Min-jae was waiting near the bar, drink in hand, talking to 2 men I didn't recognize. He saw me enter and his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something warmer than his usual calculation. He excused himself from his conversation and crossed to meet me. You look good, he said quietly, taking my arm. You mean I look the part? That too. He guided me deeper into the room. Stay close to me. Answer questions if asked directly, but keep responses brief. Let me do most of the talking. We moved through the crowd like dancers in a choreographed routine. Min-jae introduced me to a parade of faces I'd never remember. Business associates, he called them, though the way they watched me suggested they were much more than that. Each introduction followed the same pattern. My false name, the story of how I'd saved him, murmurs of appreciation that felt more like assessment than gratitude. I smiled until my face hurt and repeated variations of the same lies until they almost felt true. Halfway through the evening, a woman approached us. She was striking. Late 30s designer suit, hair pulled back in a severe bun that somehow looked elegant instead of harsh. Her eyes locked onto me with laser focus. So this is her, she said in unaccented English. The mysterious doctor. Min-jae's hand tightened slightly on my elbow. Dr. Chun, this is Park Ji-won. She manages our financial operations. Nurse practitioner. I corrected automatically, then wondered if I should have stayed silent. Ji-won's eyebrow arched. Modest. I like that. She circled me slowly, not bothering to hide her evaluation. Tell me, Dr. Chun, what made you stop that night? Most people would have kept driving. The question felt like a trap. I'm a nurse. Someone was bleeding. I stopped. Just like that. No hesitation, no fear. Her smile was sharp. The neighborhood where you supposedly found Min-jae isn't exactly safe for lone women at 2 in the morning. Supposedly. She was testing the story, looking for cracks. I was scared, I admitted, letting truth bleed into the lie. But I couldn't just leave someone to die. That's not how I'm built. Something flickered across Ji-won's face. Respect, maybe, or at least a recalibration of her assessment. She turned to Min-jae. She's either genuine or the best actress I've ever seen. She's genuine. Min-jae's voice carried absolute certainty. Which is why she's under my protection. Ji-won studied us both for another moment, then nodded slowly. Good. Because if she weren't, keeping her around would be a liability we can't afford. She walked away without another word, leaving me shaken by how casually she discussed my potential elimination. She likes you, Min-jae said once Ji-won was out of earshot. That was her liking me? She didn't recommend I kill you. For Ji-won, that's practically a warm embrace. He steered me toward a quieter corner of the room. You did well. Better than I expected. High praise. I mean it. His hand moved from my elbow to the small of my back, the touch lingering. This world, most people crack under the pressure of pretending, of being watched constantly. You're holding up. Maybe I'm just too terrified to fall apart. Fear is honest. I can work with honest. He looked down at me, and for a moment his carefully maintained distance slipped. But you're not just afraid. You're adapting. Before I could respond, commotion erupted near the entrance. Voices raised in anger. The kind of controlled fury that suggested violence was only barely leashed. Min-jae's entire demeanor changed in an instant, the almost warmth vanishing, replaced by cold alertness. His hand dropped from my back as he turned toward the disturbance. 3 men had entered, pushing past the guards who looked uncertain whether to physically stop them. The man in front was tall, heavily built, with facial tattoos crawling up his neck. Russian, I guessed, from the Cyrillic script visible above his collar. Kong, the man called across the room, his accent thick. We need to talk. Every conversation in the club had stopped. People were watching, waiting, the tension so thick I could barely breathe through it. Min-jae's hand found mine, squeezing once, stay calm, before he stepped forward to meet the intruders. Alexei. Min-jae's voice was pleasant, conversational, completely at odds with the situation. This is a private event. You weren't invited. Since when do we need invitations between associates? Alexei's gaze swept the room, landing on me. Or are you too busy playing house with your new pet to discuss business? The insult was deliberate, designed to provoke. I watched Min-jae's jaw tighten fractionally, the only sign he'd registered the slight. Dr. Chen is not your concern, Min-jae said quietly. And this is not the time or place for whatever grievance you think you have. Not my concern. Alexei laughed, a harsh sound that made my stomach clench. When you blow up 3 months of negotiations because of some woman, that becomes everyone's concern. Negotiations? I glanced at Min-jae, confused, but his focus remained locked on Alexei. The negotiations collapsed because your people couldn't meet basic terms, Min-jae replied. Don't blame your failures on irrelevant factors. Irrelevant. Alexei took a step forward, his companions flanking him. You walked away from a $50 million deal because the meeting location conflicted with babysitting your nurse. That's not irrelevant, that's weakness. The room had gone absolutely silent. I could feel dozens of eyes on us, calculating, judging. This was more than a confrontation. It was a test of Min-jae's authority, his priorities, his fitness to lead. Min-jae moved with surgical precision. One moment he was standing calmly 3 feet from Alexei. The next he had closed the distance and grabbed the Russian by his throat, slamming him against the nearest wall hard enough to rattle the artwork. The two companions reached for weapons, but froze when Min-jae's own people materialized from the crowd, guns suddenly visible. Listen carefully, Min-jae said, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying through the silent room. Dr. Chun is under my protection. That means she is untouchable. That means her safety takes priority over any deal, any negotiation, any business arrangement you think matters. He tightened his grip, cutting off Alexei's air supply for a moment before releasing slightly. If you have a problem with that, you have a problem with me. Do you have a problem with me, Alexei? Alexei's face was turning red, but he managed to shake his head. Good. Min-jae released him, stepping back smoothly. Now get out of my club before I decide your disrespect requires a more permanent solution. The Russians retreated, Alexei rubbing his throat, shooting murderous looks at both Min-jae and me. The guards who'd failed to stop them at the door looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. As soon as the intruders were gone, conversations resumed. Quieter, more careful. Everyone pretending they hadn't just witnessed a near execution. Min-jae returned to me, his expression unreadable. We're leaving, he said. Jean had the car running before we hit the exit. Min-jae guided me into the back seat, then slid in beside me, his jaw still tight with barely contained anger. We drove in silence for several minutes, the city lights blurring past the windows. What deal did you walk away from? I finally asked. Distribution partnership with the Bratva. Would have opened up new territory, significant profit potential. He stared out the window, not looking at me. The final meeting was scheduled for last Tuesday afternoon. The same Tuesday I'd sent the wrong text. The night Min-jae had shown up at my apartment with 5 motorcycles and impossible choices. You canceled because of me. I canceled because keeping you alive was more important than Russian profit margins. His tone was flat, matter of fact. Alexei's people had already identified your building, your routine. Leaving you unguarded to attend a meeting would have given them the perfect opportunity. Guilt twisted in my stomach. $50 million. Is just money. He turned to face me finally, and something in his eyes made my breath catch. Money is replaceable. You're not. The words hung between us, too heavy with meaning I didn't want to examine. This wasn't supposed to be personal. I was a liability he was managing, a problem he was solving, not someone he actually cared about protecting beyond strategic necessity. Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. Why does keeping me alive matter so much? You barely know me. Min-jae looked away again, something like pain flickering across his features. Because I already failed to save someone once. I won't fail again. The admission was raw, unguarded. So unlike his usual calculated control that I knew I was hearing truth. But before I could press further, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor shifted back to business. Gene, change of plans. Take us to the safe house on Moorhead. What's wrong? I asked. Min Jae showed me his phone. A single text message, no sender ID, just an image. My apartment building, photographed from street level. And in the foreground, clearly visible, were zip-tied roses, blood red, dozens of them, arranged on my doorstep like a funeral wreath.